My name is Pete, and welcome to my garage. Welcome back to Pete's Garage, where I am working on my 6-liter LS build. This is going to be a 6-liter stock bottom end LQ4. I'm going to put LS3 cylinder heads on it, and we're going to top it off with an LSA supercharger, and I'm going to put it in the BMW 5 Series wagon. All right, I've got my 6-liter block here ready for my car, but I need to make sure that it is ready to go for boost. And one thing I need to do is I need to make sure that this thing has a decent ring end gap. I want somewhere a little over 20 thousandths for my top and my second ring. One thing you don't want is the ends of your piston rings butting up against each other and breaking the piston. So we need to make sure that it's going to be good. A lot of times with a lot of miles, this one has probably getting close to 185, 190,000 miles on this engine block. And the lower end has never been touched. It's one of those things where I really don't want to mess with it too much because it's been good, but I want to make sure before I add boost to it that the ring end gap's going to be okay. So I'm going to at least pull the number 1 piston out, measure my ring end gap on that one. Depending on how that is, I'll go with that. I also have a set of rod bearings for it. I'm going to see how the rod bearings look. I'm assuming they're probably going to be okay. Everything looks great so far on this engine, but I'll go ahead and check it out while I have it out. So I'm going to pop the number 1 piston out. We'll take a look at it and we'll go from there. Now these caps, they're fractured caps. If you install these caps the wrong way, you'll ruin them and you'll have to get a whole new rod assembly. Oh yeah, these bearings look fantastic. These bearings look pretty good. I have a set of rod bearings for it. I'm probably just going to put a set of rod bearings in it. I'm going to go with the stock bolts. I'm not going to put ARPs in it, even though I have a set of ARPs. I just don't want to, you don't want to have to resize the rods. And with ARP bolts, they say to resize the rods after you do it. I'm just going to go back with the stock ones on that. So let's pop this piston out and see where we're at. Okay, my oil rings, they are nice and free. Everything's moving around pretty good. I'll just clean these things up and make sure my ring end gap's good. Not too bad, especially compared to some of the junkyard ones I pulled apart recently. Alright, I just got a little bit of carbon right there underneath the top, or right above the top ring. That's pretty much to be expected. There was quite a bit of carbon on the top of pistons. I already cleaned it all off. So I'll go ahead and pop off the top ring, making sure I'm really careful not to damage it. Notice there's a little dot right there, and that dot means that that goes up. Now a lot of these engines, if they've been burning oil and everything, this lower ring, this oil control ring, it'll be like seized to the actual piston in there and allowing a lot of oil to get by. This one looks fantastic. So change your oil, especially if it's 3.6. All right, here's my second ring. Now the second ring on an LS is a little different. You can see it's tapered on the inside right there, yet it also has the little dot. So you got to make sure these are installed in the correct direction whenever you put them in the engine. And also be careful, they can be very sharp if they're used. A lot of times on an engine with, I don't know, 200,000 miles, the piston ring end gap here will actually be about what we need it to be because of the wear on the engine and everything. So let's go see how it is. Let's check it out. Okay, so I'm going to install this ring into the cylinders, into the cylinder, just one of them. Now I need to square it up. You can either use a squaring tool or the piston you just removed the rings from. Makes a pretty good squaring tool. So we'll just install it. So I'm going to pull it up just a little bit because I still have my oil rings on here, so it's going to stop at the oil rings. Now hopefully you can see this in the camera, but there is a little bit of a gap right there. So let's see what it measures with a feeler gauge. Like I said, I'm looking for about a 20 to 25 thousandths gap since I'm going to boost this engine. But a lot of LS motors, that's the beauty of them, is you can pretty much throw a high mileage stock one in and be okay. There's 20, it fits in perfect, fits in pretty loose, so I think we're going to be higher than 20. 14 thousandths and a 15 thousandths, going to be 29 thousandths. And that's it. Okay, I'm looking about 29 thousandths. It's a little looser than I was wanting. I don't want to have to put new piston rings on every piston. 29 thousandths. All right, here's our top ring. Let's see what our top ring measures out at. The gap on the top ring actually looks a little tighter. Yeah, 29 doesn't fit. So this one might be about perfect. Here's a 25 thousandths right there. Perfect. Alright, so I got 25 thousandths on the top ring, 29 on the bottom, which is a little wider than I think I want. But I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna go for it. This isn't too bad. I'm gonna stick the rings back on this piston. I'm just gonna stick some new rod bearings in this thing, and we're gonna send this thing. Okay, like I said before, make sure the dot is facing upwards. Like this one. The nice thing about these LS engines piston rings is that they're low tension rings, so they don't have a ton of tension like an old school small block does, and you can just install them by hand and you don't have to have like a piston ring expander and be breaking cast iron rings. So whenever I put it back into the engine, I'm going to want to offset the gaps on both sides of this piston ring about 180 degrees out from each other. Let's see right there, if they were both lined up like that, then you're going to get too much blow by. Alright, so we're about 180 degrees out from each other. Should be good whenever I install it. Even though I could run with these bearings, I can't catch a nail on them or anything. Well, maybe I can just the tiniest bit. I'm going to go ahead and replace them because I have a set. So we'll just pop the bearing out. Always check to make sure. See, these right here are GM bearings. See right there, it says STD, so they're standard size bearings. Compare the difference between a brand new and a used bearing. You can see a little bit of wear on the sides there and everything. Really not too bad. Probably would be okay running them, but why risk it whenever I have the new bearings already in my possession. You can see the fractured rod here, where this is only going to go on one way. You can see the little tang slots right there. There's a little tang right there that we line up. Alright, I'm going to put a little oil on these bearings before I assemble it. And I'll go ahead and get this piston put back in the engine. Alright, since this is a 4-inch bore, if you get one of these sleeves from, say, Summit Racing or something like that, it makes it so much easier to install these pistons into the engine. And always make sure you install the piston with the dot facing the front of the engine. I'm going to lube up a bearing, and then I want to make sure I lube up the rings. Don't want to install the rings dry. I'll lube up the piston skirt too. Okay, so I want to put the dot towards the front of the engine. And it's easiest, since this thing is funnel, it's kind of like a funnel, it's tapered. If I pre-install the piston in there, it'll already compress the rings to where this should just slide down. I want to make sure this is dropped all the way down, and I should be able to just push it. Send it home. Just push it down. Okay, I'm going to use a little plastic gauge and check my bearing clearance right there. Make sure everything's good. Should crush the bearing enough to see what my now we can see where we're at as far as our plastic gauge. Okay, got pretty wide there. Alright, we are right at about 1.5 thousandths right there. 1.5 thousandths, I think that's perfect. You can also see in the rod cap right there, we're at 1.5 thousandths. Right there in the thinner part, it is about 2, so we're somewhere between 1.5 and 2 thousandths. So I'd say that's about right. That's right where we want to be. All right, lube up the bearing. Make sure there's no debris on it or anything. And make sure that I get the rod cap installed correctly. And you'll know whenever you have this rod cap installed correctly, because this parting line right here, you can't see it. It fits together so nicely. Alright, now I just need to torque my rod bolts. Don't forget to do that. For the rod bolts, we're going to tighten them to 15 foot-pounds and then 75 degrees. Alright, 15 foot-pounds. Go. All right, that one's ready to roll. Now I just got to put new bearings in all the rest of them. I'm going to have to take off my windage tray and the pickup tube. I'm going to go one at a time, throwing bearings in it, and should be done pretty soon. All right, all the people who know me personally are probably tired of hearing me talk about this engine that I was going to supposedly put in a car for the last year. All right, COVID-19's here, and now I have time to work on this. So I'm going to go ahead and bust my butt and get this thing ready to roll. Got the ring end gap set, and I just need to soak my lifters because it's been sitting for a little while. I got new rod bearings put in it, and I'm ready to throw my heads on everything once I soak my lifters. So let's do it. Okay, so we got the bottom end wrapped up. Now it's time to do the top end of this engine, and I need to get my cylinder heads installed. And before I do that, I've already cleaned up the deck surface right here, so it's cleaned off. But I need to clean out my cylinder head bolt holes. And the way I'm going to do that is I have an old cylinder head bolt that I've ground a couple grooves in there to catch any debris. And we're just going to run this in the holes to make sure that everything's good. The factory bolts have thread sealer on them, and if you don't get the thread sealer out, then sometimes your head bolts tend to be tougher to get in the engine. So far I'm looking good. If coolant or oil is left in these holes, whenever you tighten the bolt down, it could basically hydrolock the oil or coolant in there, in that hole, and it'll just crack the block. So don't do that. See, that one pulled some stuff out, and I could tell when I was going in that it was going to be nasty. Alright, I'm going to put some head studs on this engine, mainly because I can reuse them and I don't have to replace them if I ever have to take my cylinder heads off. So I'm going to go ahead and put some studs in this engine. I got some ARP lube and everything for them. And these are actually some eBay head studs. They're not ARPs. So I cheaped out. I'm kind of cheap. Alright, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about these eBay Chinese head studs. I think they're Pro Comp or something like that. I don't know. There's not even the name on the box. So that is a little sketchy. Not going to lie, it looks pretty cool with these head studs here. Studded block looks pretty cool. Alright, now I have a set of LS9 head gaskets that I'm going to use with this setup. Alright, we got a set of LS9 style head gaskets here. They're, I believe, 7 layers MLS gaskets. Cool thing about these, you can even throw them on a 5.3 if you're building a boosted 5.3. And you got to be careful, these things can cut you too. They are multi-layer steel gaskets. They're stuck in there. Alright, you see these are good for a 6.0 and a 6.2. However, you can put them on a 5.3 and they work. So also make sure front goes to the front. And they work both directions for both sides. You can see all the different layers right here on these head gaskets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers. All right, I think we're ready for a cylinder head on this one. So we're going with a set of LS3 style cylinder heads. You can see the rectangle ports on there. And that's going to really help fit the supercharger on there, because they do make adapter kits to bolt a LSA supercharger to cathedral port heads. That will also raise the installed height of the supercharger. And with my setup, space is at a premium here with hood clearance. I think I might even have to cut the hood anyway, so we'll see. All right. Voila. I can tell you right now that these studs are not going to work. Oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Looks like I needed an entire engine of these short ones. I guess this is what I get for buying Chinese head studs. Looks like I need to get my butt on eBay and order the right studs. I don't know what the deal is. At first I thought they sent me 4 studs that were incorrect. Instead they sent me 4 studs that were correct, and it looks like they sent me 18 studs that were incorrect. So I need to get on eBay and see what's going on and get the right stuff coming. Damn, that pisses me off. This project I'm going to use the F-body windage tray. You can see it says rear there, so that's going to go to the rear. Okay, I'm going to loosely install the nuts. That one right there is for the pickup tube, and I believe, well, one of the others is. I guess I'll find out. Oh, yeah, since this is an F-body pickup tube, there's only one spot where it mounts, whereas a truck has 2 different spots where it mounts. Okay, since this is an F-body pickup tube, this looks a little different than the truck pickup tube, so you have to use the correct O-ring. The correct O-ring for the F-body is going to be the blue one. So I'll put oil on that. Now you want to make sure that this has a snug fit when it goes into the oil pump. If it doesn't have a snug fit, then it's going to suck air, a lot like having a hole or a crack in your straw, your drinking straw. So we need to torque all this stuff down. I'm just going to put this oil pan on here for now just to cover everything up so I can mock up for my motor mounts and my headers and everything. Whenever I go back together. Then I'll put a new gasket on it and reseal it and everything, but for now I'm just going to get it on there to seal up the engine. And I'm going to try to build my motor mounts around this F-body oil pan. So the F-body oil pan is fairly shallow right here and right here, so we should be good with that pan. Okay, the switch to LS3 style rectangle port heads means you got to have an offset rocker arm for the intake valve. If you see the exhaust valves are straight, the intake valve, it offsets it just a little bit. Now I don't have the push rods yet in there. I'm not going to be able to check for push rod length until I get the head studs and everything, the correct head studs and everything bolted down. But just for now, I'm just going to start these just a little bit just to get them out of my garage because everything's such a mess. And then I'll put it all together once I get everything kind of mocked up and ready to roll. Oops. The only reason I'm putting these on is just because I want to get them off of the ground in the garage here, and I can get the valve covers on this thing, so it's at least pretty much sealed up, and I'll tape off the intake ports and everything. But you can see there's no push rods in them. And as far as doing like a trunnion upgrade, my cam only has 588 lift. If I do decide to go with a big lift cam, a little later on, maybe I'll switch to the, do a trunnion upgrade, but I think it's a little overkill with less than 600 lift cam. And I'm going to make these valve, I think before it's all said and done, I'm going to make these valve covers look a little better than they do. These kind of look like crap. The thing with LS engines, unless you do a remote style ignition coil setup, you don't really see too much of the valve covers. But in this one's case, I mean, it's peeling the paint that was on there. I need to get the correct water pump and balancer for this so I can get the offset and everything of the front accessory drive right as I mount this into the car. But I gotta get the old motor taken out of the car first. But this is progress. I also got